The baby's cries echoed through the empty church, just as dawn broke over Aztec, New Mexico territory. And Amelia Sanders knew this was the end of one life and the desperate beginning of another. She sat on the wooden steps of the small whitewashed church, her daughter Mary clutched against her chest, both of them exhausted from 3 days of walking with almost no food or water. The September morning in 1878 was already growing warm, promising another scorching day. Amelia's dress was torn at the hem, her shoes nearly falling apart, and her dark hair hung in tangled waves around her pale face. She was 20 years old, though she felt ancient. Everything she owned in the world was wrapped in a thin blanket tied at her waist, and even that amounted to almost nothing. Her husband had died 4 months ago in a mining accident outside Silver City. At least, that was what the foreman had told her when he came to their small cabin to deliver the news. What he had not told her was that the mining company would evict her within the week, or that Samuel's wages would never be paid out to her, or that being a widow with an infant in the New Mexico territory meant being utterly and completely alone. Her parents were dead. Samuel's family had never approved of their marriage, and the few friends they had made could barely feed themselves. She had tried. God knew she had tried. She had taken in washing, but there was little call for it in Silver City and even less money to pay for such services. She had attempted to work at the general store, but the owner's wife had made it clear that a woman with a crying baby was not welcome. She had even begged for work at the saloon, willing to cook or clean, anything that did not require her to go upstairs with the men. But the owner had laughed in her face and told her to come back when she was desperate enough to be useful. Now she was desperate, but in a different way. 3 days ago, she had spent her last coins on milk for Mary, and realized she had nothing left. The landlord of her boarding house had threatened to throw her out if she could not pay, and when she admitted she had no money, he had looked at her in a way that made her skin crawl and suggested an alternative arrangement. She had grabbed Mary and run. She had walked north out of Silver City with no real destination in mind, just knowing she needed to get away. A kind farmer had given her a ride in his wagon for half a day, and she had walked the rest of the way, sleeping in an abandoned barn one night and under a tree the next. When she had stumbled into Aztec yesterday evening, the church had been the first building she saw. It had seemed like a sign. Now, sitting on these steps as the sun rose higher, Amelia wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Mary was hungry, crying in that desperate way that broke her heart. Amelia had tried to nurse her, but her own body, starved and exhausted, had little to offer. She rocked her daughter gently, humming a lullaby her own mother had sung to her, and wondered what would happen to them. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A man on horseback was riding down the main street, his horse moving at an easy walk. He wore typical cowboy attire, a worn hat, dusty boots, and a leather vest over a faded blue shirt. Even from a distance, Amelia could see he was tall and broad-shouldered. As he drew closer, she instinctively pulled Mary tighter against her chest and looked down, hoping he would simply ride past. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped. She could feel him looking at her, and her heart began to pound with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Maybe he would help. Maybe he would hurt them. Maybe he would just leave them alone. She did not look up. "Morning, miss," he said. His voice was deep and carried a hint of concern rather than threat. "You all right there?" Amelia finally raised her eyes to look at him. He was younger than she had expected, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly under his hat and brown eyes that looked genuinely worried. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, and he had the weathered look of someone who worked outside for a living. He was not smiling, but there was something kind in his expression that made her want to trust him, even as every instinct told her to be careful. "I'm fine, sir," she said, her voice hoarse from thirst. "Just resting." He dismounted in one smooth motion and took a step closer, though he kept a respectful distance. "Begging your pardon, miss, but you don't look fine. You look like you have not eaten in days, and that baby sounds mighty hungry." Tears sprang to Amelia's eyes before she could stop them. She was so tired of being strong, so tired of pretending everything would somehow work out. "We're all right," she insisted, but her voice broke on the words, betraying her. The cowboy glanced around, then back at her. "My name is Samuel Quentin. I've got a ranch about 3 miles out of town." "When's the last time you ate?" "I don't need charity," Amelia said automatically, though even as she said it, she knew how foolish it sounded. She desperately needed charity, needed help, needed anything anyone was willing to give. "Not charity," Samuel said. "Basic human decency. You and your little one need food and rest, and I'm in a position to offer both. No strings attached. I give you my word." Amelia looked at him for a long moment, trying to read his face, trying to determine if he was telling the truth, or if this was some kind of trap. But Mary's cries were growing weaker, which was worse than when they were strong, and Amelia knew she was out of options. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "No, you don't," Samuel agreed. "But you are sitting on church steps with a starving baby, and I am guessing you have got nowhere else to go. Let me help. If you don't like my ranch or don't feel safe, I will bring you right back to town tomorrow. But at least let me get some food in both of you." There was something in his eyes, something honest and straightforward that made Amelia's decision for her. She nodded slowly. "My name is Amelia Sanders. This is my daughter, Mary. Pleased to meet you both, even under the circumstances," Samuel said. He walked back to his horse and untied a canteen from his saddle, then brought it to her. "Here. It's just water, but it is clean." Amelia took the canteen with shaking hands and drank deeply. The water was cool and tasted better than anything she could remember. She forced herself to stop before she made herself sick, then wet a corner of her sleeve and used it to moisten Mary's lips. The baby quieted slightly, her little mouth working at the damp fabric. "Let me help you up," Samuel said, offering his hand. Amelia took it and let him pull her to her feet. She swayed slightly, dizzy from hunger and exhaustion, and Samuel steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Easy now. When did you last sleep in a real bed?" "I don't remember," Amelia admitted. It felt like years, though it had probably been less than a week. Samuel looked troubled, but he did not press her with more questions. Instead, he walked back to his horse and swung up into the saddle, then reached down toward her. "I know it is not proper, but can you ride with me? It is 3 miles, and I don't think you will make it walking." Amelia hesitated for only a moment before reaching up with her free hand. Samuel grasped her wrist firmly and helped her up behind him, Mary still clutched in her other arm. It was awkward and improper, and she had to sit side saddle with her legs hanging off one side, but she managed to get settled. She had no choice but to hold onto Samuel's waist with her free arm to keep from falling off. "You all right?" he asked over his shoulder. "Yes," Amelia said softly, though she was acutely aware of how close they were, of the solid warmth of his back against her side, of the impropriety of the whole situation. But propriety was a luxury she could no longer afford. Samuel clicked his tongue and the horse began to walk. The motion was gentle, and despite everything, Amelia felt herself relaxing slightly. The sun was fully up now, warming her cold skin. The landscape around Aztec was beautiful in its harsh way, mesas and canyons and the San Juan River cutting through the valley. She had been too exhausted to notice yesterday, but now she could see it properly. "How old is your daughter?" Samuel asked as they rode. For months, Amelia said. She was born in May. She is beautiful, looks like you. Amelia felt a small smile tug at her lips despite everything. Thank you. They rode in silence for a while, and Amelia found her eyes growing heavy. The rhythm of the horse's gait was soothing, and she was so very tired. She jerked herself awake twice, afraid of falling, before Samuel spoke again. It is all right if you need to sleep. I won't let you fall. I shouldn't, Amelia murmured, but even as she said it, her eyes were closing. The last thing she remembered was the feeling of Samuel's strong back against her cheek and the sound of hoofbeats on the dusty trail. She woke to the sound of a door opening and realized she was being carried. She jerked awake fully, momentarily panicked, until she saw Samuel's face close to hers. He had Mary tucked carefully in one arm and was carrying Amelia in the other, shouldering his way through the door of a small ranch house. Sorry, he said when he saw her eyes open. You fell asleep and I did not want to wake you. We are here. Amelia looked around, taking in her surroundings. The ranch house was modest but well built, made of adobe with a wooden porch. Inside, it was simple but clean, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, a stone fireplace, and a couple of doors that presumably led to bedrooms. The furniture was rough but sturdy, clearly made by hand. It had the feeling of a bachelor's home, functional rather than decorative, but it was infinitely better than the church steps or the side of the road. Samuel set her carefully on her feet, then transferred Mary back to her arms. The bedroom is through there, he said, pointing to one of the doors. You should lie down. I will get some food ready. I can help, Amelia started to say, but Samuel shook his head. You need to rest, please. I can manage a simple meal. Amelia was too exhausted to argue. She went into the bedroom he had indicated and found a simple room with a large bed covered in quilts, a dresser, and a washstand. The window had curtains, and morning sunlight filtered through them softly. It was the nicest room she had seen in months. She sat on the edge of the bed with Mary, who had started crying again. Amelia tried once more to nurse her, and this time, perhaps because of the water she had drunk, Mary was able to get a little sustenance. It was not much, but it was something. Amelia held her daughter close and fought back tears of relief. They were safe, at least for now. There was a knock on the door frame. Samuel stood there with a plate of food, bread and cheese and some dried meat, along with a cup of milk. Thought you might want this now rather than waiting, he said. The milk is fresh from this morning, my neighbor's cow. Amelia stared at the food, her stomach clenching with hunger. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Samuel set the plate and cup on the dresser. I will be in the other room if you need anything. There is a cradle out there by the fireplace, belonged to my sister's boy. You can use it for Mary when you are ready. He left before Amelia could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. Amelia set Mary down on the bed, surrounding her with pillows so she could not roll off, and practically lunged for the food. She forced herself to eat slowly, knowing that gorging herself after days of hunger would make her sick, but it was one of the hardest things she had ever done. The bread was fresh, the cheese was sharp and creamy, and the dried meat was salted and delicious. She drank the milk slowly, savoring every drop. When she had finished, she felt almost human again. She picked up Mary and carried her out to the main room. Samuel was at the stove, stirring something in a pot. He looked up when she entered, feeling better. Much, thank you. Amelia looked around and spotted the cradle he had mentioned. It was made of dark wood, worn smooth with use and lined with soft blankets. She carried Mary over to it and carefully laid her down. The baby fussed for a moment, then settled, her eyes already drifting closed. She is exhausted, poor thing, Samuel said softly. He came over and looked down at Mary with an expression Amelia could not quite read. "You both need rest. I am making soup. It will be ready in a couple hours. You should sleep until then." "I should help you," Amelia said, though she swayed on her feet even as she said it. "I don't want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," Samuel said firmly. "You are a person in need and I am helping. That is all. Now please go lie down before you fall down." Amelia wanted to protest, but she was so tired she could barely see straight. She nodded and made her way back to the bedroom, lying down on the soft bed. She was asleep within seconds. When she woke, the light outside had changed, suggesting it was late afternoon. She sat up quickly, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. She could hear soft sounds from the other room, and she got up and opened the door. Samuel was sitting in a rocking chair near the cradle, gently rocking it with his foot while he read a book. Mary was asleep inside, looking more peaceful than Amelia had seen her in days. Samuel looked up when Amelia entered. "She woke about an hour ago," he said quietly, "crying something fierce. I gave her a little milk with a clean rag to suck on. Seemed to help. Hope that was all right." Amelia felt tears spring to her eyes again. This stranger had cared for her daughter while she slept. "That was more than all right, thank you." Samuel stood up. "Soup is ready, you should eat." The soup was simple but hearty, made with vegetables and a little bit of meat, and Amelia ate 2 full bowls. Samuel ate with her, and they sat in companionable silence for a while. Finally, Amelia could not contain her curiosity any longer. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. "You don't know me." "I could be anyone." Samuel was quiet for a moment, stirring his soup thoughtfully. "My mother died when I was young," he said finally. "My father raised me and my sister on his own. It was hard, and there were times when we did not have much, but there was always someone willing to help. A neighbor who brought food, a friend who watched us while my father worked. I learned that when you can help someone, you do. It is as simple as that." "Nothing is ever that simple," Amelia said softly. "Maybe not," Samuel admitted, "but it should be." He looked at her directly. "You don't have to tell me your story if you do not want to, but I want you to know that you and Mary are welcome here for as long as you need. I have space, and I could use help around the ranch anyway. If you want to work for your keep, there is plenty to do. If you just need a safe place to rest and figure out your next move, that is fine too." Amelia looked down at her bowl, overwhelmed by his kindness. "My husband died," she said quietly, 4 months ago. Mining accident. I tried to make it on my own, but I could not. I had nowhere else to go, so I started walking. I ended up in Aztec yesterday and spent the night in that church. I don't have any money. I don't have any family. All I have is Mary." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how I will ever repay you for this." "You don't need to repay me," Samuel said gently. "Just get your strength back. Take care of your little girl. That is enough." They talked for a while longer, carefully skirting around the more painful details of Amelia's recent past. Samuel told her about his ranch, how he raised cattle and horses, how he had built this house with his father before the old man had passed away 3 years ago. His sister had married and moved to Santa Fe, and he had been running the ranch alone since then. It was not a huge operation, but it was enough to make a living. As the evening wore on, Amelia found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. Samuel was easy to talk to, and he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. He did not press her for details she did not want to share, and he did not make her feel like a charity case. He just treated her like a person, which was more than most people had done since Samuel's death. When Mary woke again and started crying, Amelia picked her up and tried to nurse her. Samuel politely turned away, busying himself with cleaning up from dinner. Amelia appreciated the gesture, though she was so tired of being modest that she almost did not care anymore. Mary nursed for a few minutes, getting a little more this time, and Amelia felt a spark of hope. Maybe if she could eat regularly, her body would recover enough to properly feed her daughter. "I should prepare the other bedroom for you," Samuel said when Mary had finished. "The one you were in earlier, that is mine. I will take the smaller room." "I cannot take your bed," Amelia protested. "That is not right. The other room does not have a bed right now, just a cot," Samuel explained. "You and Mary need the real bed more than I do. I insist." Amelia wanted to argue, but she was too grateful to push too hard. "Thank you," she said instead, "for everything." Samuel smiled at her, and for the first time, Amelia noticed that he had a nice smile, warm and genuine. "You are welcome." That night, lying in Samuel's bed with Mary sleeping peacefully beside her in the cradle, Amelia stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had been sitting on church steps with no hope and no future. Now she was in a safe, warm house with food in her stomach, and a kind man who had asked for nothing in return. It seemed too good to be true, and part of her was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Samuel to reveal his true intentions or demand something she could not give. But another part of her, a small part she had thought was dead, whispered that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world. Maybe Samuel really was just a kind man who wanted to help. Maybe she and Mary really would be all right. She fell asleep with that thought, the first peaceful sleep she had had in months. The next morning, Amelia woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was, before the events of yesterday came flooding back. She sat up and looked at the cradle. Mary was still sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. Amelia got up and splashed water on her face from the washstand, then smoothed her hair as best she could. She looked terrible, she knew, but there was nothing to be done about it now. She went out to the main room and found Samuel at the stove, cooking breakfast. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Morning. Hope I did not wake you. Not at all. It smells wonderful. Just bacon and eggs, nothing fancy." He gestured to the table. "Sit down. I will have it ready in a minute." Amelia sat, still feeling awkward about being waited on, but Samuel moved around the kitchen with such easy confidence that she did not feel like she was in the way. He served her a plate piled high with food, along with a cup of coffee, and sat down across from her with his own plate. "I need to ride out and check on the cattle today," he said as they ate. "Should be gone most of the morning. You are welcome to rest or look around or whatever you need. There are some clothes that belong to my sister in the chest at the foot of the bed. She left them here when she moved. You are about the same size, so they might fit you. Feel free to use anything you need." Amelia felt a lump in her throat. "You have already done so much." "Not nearly enough," Samuel said quietly. He met her eyes. "I meant what I said yesterday. You are welcome here for as long as you need. I know you probably don't trust that yet, and I don't blame you, but I hope in time you will see that I mean it." "I already see it," Amelia said softly. "I just don't understand why," Samuel shrugged. "Maybe there does not need to be a why. Maybe it is just the right thing to do." After breakfast, Samuel headed out to work, and Amelia was left alone with Mary in the quiet house. She explored a bit, familiarizing herself with the layout. The house was small but well kept, everything in its place. There were books on a shelf, mostly about ranching and animal husbandry, but also a few novels. The kitchen was stocked with basics: flour and sugar and coffee, dried beans and preserves. It was clear that Samuel lived simply but comfortably. She went back to the bedroom and opened the chest Samuel had mentioned. Inside were several dresses, all neatly folded, along with some undergarments and a nightgown. Amelia pulled out a simple blue dress and held it up. It looked like it would fit, or at least be close enough. She had been wearing the same dress for days, and it was torn and filthy. She found a bucket and filled it with water from the pump outside, then heated it on the stove. When it was warm, she stripped out of her ruined dress and washed herself as best she could, a makeshift bath that left her feeling more human than she had in days. She washed her hair too, using a bit of soap she found by the washstand. Then she put on the blue dress, and while it was a bit loose in some places, it fit reasonably well. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the dresser and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked cleaner, healthier, more like her old self. Mary woke up and needed changing. Amelia had only one spare cloth for her, and it was as dirty as her old dress had been. She washed it and hung it outside to dry, then used a clean towel from the house as a temporary diaper. She made a mental note to ask Samuel if there was any fabric she could use to make more. She could sew reasonably well, and making things for Mary would give her something useful to do. When Samuel returned late that morning, dusty and sweaty from his work, he stopped short when he saw Amelia. "You look different," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Amelia blush. "Your sister's dress fit," she said. "I hope that is all right, more than all right. Blue suits you." They looked at each other for a long moment, and Amelia felt something shift in the air between them, something she could not quite name. Then Mary made a noise, breaking the spell, and Samuel cleared his throat. "I should wash up," he said. "Then we can have some lunch." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Samuel would work on the ranch during the day, and Amelia would take care of the house and Mary. She cooked meals, cleaned, did laundry, all the things she could do to feel like she was contributing rather than just taking. Samuel protested at first, saying she did not need to do all that, but Amelia insisted. She needed to feel useful, needed to feel like she was earning her place here, even if Samuel did not require it. In the evenings, they would eat together and talk. Samuel told her about his work, about the cattle and the land, about his plans to expand the ranch eventually. Amelia told him about her life before Samuel's death, about growing up in Kansas, about how she had met her husband when he came through town looking for work. She talked about the good times, and Samuel listened with genuine interest. She found herself looking forward to those evening conversations, to the sound of Samuel's voice and the way he really listened when she spoke. He had a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her husband died. He was kind to Mary too, often holding her while Amelia cooked or cleaned, talking to her in a soft voice that made the baby coo and smile. A week after Amelia had arrived, Samuel came home with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Got something for you in town today," he said, handing it to her. Amelia unwrapped it to find several yards of soft fabric, perfect for making clothes for Mary. There were also needles and thread and a small bag of peppermint candies. Amelia stared at the gifts, overwhelmed. "You did not have to do this," she whispered. "I know," Samuel said. "I wanted to." Amelia looked up at him, and for a moment she thought she saw something in his eyes, something warm and tender that made her heart skip. But then he looked away, and she wondered if she had imagined it. "Thank you," she said. "This is incredibly kind." Over the next few weeks, Amelia settled into life on the ranch. She made clothes for Mary, stitching late into the evening by lamplight. She tended a small garden that Samuel had planted but never had time to maintain properly. She cooked meals that were more elaborate than the simple fare Samuel had been making for himself. The house began to feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep. Mary grew stronger too, filling out and becoming more alert. She smiled now, real smiles that lit up her whole face, and she was beginning to make babbling sounds that suggested she would be talking before long. Amelia's body recovered as well, able to properly feed her daughter now that she was eating regularly and getting enough rest. She and Samuel grew more comfortable with each other too. They laughed together now, shared jokes and stories. Samuel taught her about the ranch, showing her how to care for the horses and explaining the work that went into running a cattle operation. Amelia found it fascinating, this world that was so different from anything she had known before. But beneath the comfortable routine, Amelia was becoming increasingly aware of Samuel in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude. She noticed the way his muscles moved when he lifted heavy objects, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his voice dropped to a gentle murmur when he talked to Mary. She noticed how thoughtful he was, how he always made sure she had everything she needed, how he treated her with respect and kindness even though she was essentially dependent on him. She tried to push the feelings away. It was too soon after Samuel's death, too complicated given the circumstances. She was a widow with a baby, living in the house of a man she barely knew. Getting involved with him would be foolish, would complicate everything. But the feelings persisted, growing stronger each day. One evening in late October, about 6 weeks after Amelia had arrived, they were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the mesas. Mary was asleep inside, and the air was cool and pleasant. Samuel had been quiet all evening, and Amelia had noticed him glancing at her several times with an expression she could not quite read. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Of course. You ever think about staying? Permanently, I mean. Not just until you figure out what to do next, but really staying." Amelia's heart began to pound. "I have thought about it," she admitted, "but I do not want to impose on you forever." "You would not be imposing," Samuel said. He turned to look at her directly. "Amelia, I want to be honest with you. These past weeks, having you and Mary here, it has been the happiest I have been since my father died. Coming home to a warm house and a good meal, hearing you laugh, watching Mary grow, it has made me realize how lonely I was before. I don't want that to end." "Samuel," Amelia whispered, not sure what to say. "I know it is complicated," he continued. "I know you are still grieving your husband, and I know the circumstances of how we met were not conventional, but I care about you, Amelia. I care about you and Mary both. And I think maybe, if you gave it enough time, you might come to care about me too. Not right now, I know it is too soon, but eventually." Amelia looked at him, at his earnest face and hopeful eyes, and felt something break open inside her. "Samuel, I already care about you," she said softly. "More than I should, probably. I have been trying not to, because it feels too soon and too complicated, and I do not want you to think I am just grateful or desperate. But the truth is, you are the kindest man I have ever met. You saved my life and Mary's life, and you asked for nothing in return. You have treated me with respect and dignity when I had none left. How could I not care about you?" Samuel reached over and took her hand, and the touch sent a shiver through her. "So stay," he said. "Stay here with me. Let me take care of you and Mary. Let me be the family you need." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Eventually, if you will have me," Samuel said. "But not right now, not until you are ready. For now, I am just asking you to stay, to give us a chance to see where this goes." Amelia looked at their joined hands, then up at Samuel's face. She thought about her late husband, about the guilt she felt for having feelings for another man so soon after his death. But she also thought about the life she could have here, the safety and security, and yes, the love that Samuel was offering. She thought about Mary, about giving her daughter a real home and a father figure who clearly adored her. "I will stay," she said finally. "I want to stay." Samuel's face broke into a wide smile, and he squeezed her hand gently. "You have made me very happy." They sat there for a long time, holding hands and watching the stars come out, neither of them speaking but both of them feeling the weight and promise of what had just been said. The next few months were some of the best of Amelia's life. She and Samuel grew closer, slowly and carefully, building a foundation of friendship and trust that went deeper than physical attraction, though Amelia could not deny that she was increasingly attracted to him. He was handsome in a rugged way, but more than that, he was good. He was patient with Mary, teaching her simple things as she grew and developed. He was thoughtful with Amelia, always making sure she was comfortable, that she had what she needed. In November, they went to town together for the first time. Amelia had been nervous about it, worried about what people would think when they saw her living with Samuel, but Samuel had insisted it would be fine. "Anyone who wants to judge can keep their opinions to themselves," he had said firmly. At the general store, Samuel introduced her as a friend who was staying at his ranch, and if the shopkeeper had any opinions about that, he kept them to himself. Samuel bought supplies, and he insisted on getting a new dress for Amelia, a deep green wool that would be warm for winter. He also bought a toy for Mary, a little wooden horse that she immediately tried to put in her mouth. On the way home, Samuel stopped the wagon at a spot overlooking the valley. "I wanted to show you something," he said. He helped her down from the wagon and they stood looking at the view. The late afternoon sun painted the mesas in shades of red and gold, and the San Juan River wound through the valley like a silver ribbon. "It is beautiful," Amelia said. "This is why I love this place," Samuel said. "It is harsh sometimes and life here is not easy. But there is a beauty to it that you do not find anywhere else, a freedom. When I am out here, I feel like anything is possible." Amelia looked at him, at his profile against the sunset, and felt her heart swell with emotion. "Samuel," she said softly. He turned to look at her, and something in her expression must have told him what she was feeling, because he stepped closer. "Amelia," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Can I kiss you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice, and Samuel cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and Amelia felt tears spring to her eyes. When they broke apart, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I know it is fast and I know the timing is not perfect, but I love you and I wanted you to know." "I love you too," Amelia said, and as she said it, she knew it was true. It was different from what she had felt for her first husband, but it was no less real. "I love you so much." They kissed again, longer this time, and when they finally broke apart, they were both smiling. They drove home in comfortable silence, Amelia's hand in Samuel's, both of them feeling the rightness of it. Winter came to New Mexico territory, bringing cold nights and occasional snow. The ranch work slowed down, and Samuel spent more time in the house, which Amelia loved. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, Samuel reading while Amelia sewed or worked on some other project, Mary playing with her toys on a blanket on the floor. It felt like a real family, and Amelia treasured every moment. In December, Samuel went to town and came back with a small box. That evening, after Mary was asleep, he got down on one knee in front of Amelia. "I know we said we would wait," he said, "but I do not want to wait any more. Amelia Sanders, will you marry me?" Amelia looked at the ring in the box, a simple gold band that must have cost Samuel more than he could easily afford, and felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Samuel slipped the ring on her finger and stood up, pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply. When they broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "When?" Amelia asked. "When do you want to get married?" "As soon as possible," Samuel said. Tomorrow if we could, but I know that is not practical. What about after Christmas? That gives us time to do it properly. After Christmas sounds perfect. They were married on the last day of 1878 in the same church where Samuel had found Amelia all those months ago. The ceremony was small, just a handful of Samuel's friends and neighbors, but it was beautiful. Amelia wore the green dress Samuel had bought her, and Samuel wore his best suit. Mary, now 8 months old and sitting up on her own, was held by Samuel's neighbor during the ceremony and babbled happily through the whole thing. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Amelia with such tenderness that several people in the congregation wiped their eyes. Amelia felt like her heart would burst with happiness. 6 months ago, she had been sitting on the steps of this church with nothing and no one. Now she had a husband who loved her, a home, a future. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The winter of 1879 was long but happy. Samuel and Amelia grew into their new life as husband and wife, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. Samuel was an attentive husband, always making sure Amelia was happy and cared for. Amelia tried to be a good wife, keeping the house clean and preparing meals that Samuel enjoyed. But more than the practical aspects, they were partners, friends as well as spouses. They talked about everything, shared their dreams and fears, supported each other through hard days and celebrated the good ones together. Mary thrived too, growing into a happy, curious baby who was fascinated by everything around her. Samuel doted on her, and Mary clearly adored him back, reaching for him whenever he came into the room and crying when he left. To everyone who saw them, they looked like a natural family, and Amelia often forgot that Samuel was not Mary's biological father. In every way that mattered, he was her father and Mary was his daughter. Spring came, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle had calves, and Samuel was busy with the work of managing them. Amelia helped where she could, though with Mary to care for, she could not do as much as she would have liked. But she did what she could, and Samuel always made her feel like her contribution was valuable. One evening in April, as they were preparing for bed, Amelia realized she had something to tell Samuel. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not been sure until now. She was nervous, worried about how he would react, but she knew she had to tell him. "Samuel," she said as they got into bed, "I have something to tell you." He turned to look at her, concern crossing his face. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong, at least I do not think so. I am pregnant." Samuel stared at her for a moment, and Amelia held her breath, trying to read his expression. Then a huge smile broke across his face. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Amelia said, relief flooding through her. "In the fall, probably October or November." Samuel pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. "That is wonderful news." "That is the best news I have heard in my whole life." "You are happy?" Amelia asked, though she could already tell he was. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Samuel said. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "I am going to be a father, a real father." "You already are a father," Amelia said softly. "You are Mary's father in every way that matters. I know, and I love her like she is my own. But this, a baby that is ours together, it feels like a new beginning. For all of us." They talked late into the night about the baby, about names and nursery arrangements and all the things they would need. Samuel was so excited that Amelia found her own excitement growing to match his. She had been worried about having another baby so soon, worried about the work and the expense and the complications. But seeing Samuel's joy, feeling his love and support, she knew everything would be all right. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Amelia was sick in the mornings for a few weeks, but it passed, and after that she felt good. Samuel was attentive without being overbearing, always making sure she was comfortable but not treating her like she was fragile. He took on more of the housework so she could rest, and he spent hours playing with Mary to give Amelia time to herself. In May, they received a letter from Samuel's sister in Santa Fe. She was pregnant too, due around the same time as Amelia, and she wanted to come visit before the babies were born. Samuel was thrilled, and Amelia was nervous. She had never met Samuel's sister, and she worried that the woman might not approve of her brother's hasty marriage to a widow with a baby. But when Anna Quentin arrived in June, all of Amelia's fears evaporated. Anna was warm and friendly, a petite woman with Samuel's same dark hair and kind eyes. She embraced Amelia like a sister and immediately fell in love with Mary. "I am so glad Samuel found you," Anna said on her first evening there. They were sitting on the porch while Samuel put Mary to bed. "He has been so lonely since our father died. I worried about him out here all alone. But now, seeing him with you and Mary, seeing how happy he is, it is everything I wanted for him." "He saved my life," Amelia said simply. "I do not know what would have happened to Mary and me if he had not found us that day." "Samuel has always been a caretaker," Anna said. "Even when we were children, he was always the one looking out for everyone else. It is good that he finally has someone to take care of him too." Anna stayed for 2 weeks, and in that time, Amelia and she became close friends. Anna told stories about Samuel as a boy, making both Amelia and Samuel laugh. She helped around the house and played with Mary, and she talked excitedly with Amelia about their upcoming babies. When she left to return to Santa Fe, Amelia was sad to see her go, but Anna promised to come back after the babies were born so they could introduce their children to each other. Summer was hot and long, and Amelia grew increasingly uncomfortable as her belly expanded. Samuel did everything he could to make her comfortable, bringing her cool water, fanning her when the heat was unbearable, rubbing her aching feet in the evenings. Mary, now over a year old and walking, was fascinated by Amelia's belly and would often pat it gently, as if she understood there was a baby inside. In September, they began preparing in earnest for the baby's arrival. Samuel cleaned and organized the spare room, turning it into a proper nursery. Amelia sewed blankets and gowns, using fabric Samuel bought on his trips to town. They decided that if the baby was a boy, they would name him Thomas after Samuel's father. If it was a girl, they would name her Rose after Amelia's mother. On a cool October night, Amelia went into labor. Samuel rode to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Patterson who lived a few miles away, while Amelia breathed through the contractions and tried not to panic. The labor was long and difficult, much worse than it had been with Mary, and there were moments when Amelia was scared. But Samuel stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, encouraging her with words of love and support. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, their son was born. Samuel cut the cord with shaking hands, and when Mrs. Patterson placed the baby in Amelia's arms, both parents cried. The baby was perfect, with a head of dark hair and strong lungs that announced his arrival to the world. "Thomas," Samuel whispered, looking at his son with wonder. "Thomas Samuel Quentin." "He is beautiful," Amelia said, exhausted but happy. Samuel kissed her forehead. "You are amazing. You are the strongest, most incredible woman I have ever known." Later, after Mrs. Patterson had left and Amelia was resting comfortably in bed with baby Thomas asleep beside her, Samuel brought Mary in to meet her brother. The little girl was curious, peering at the tiny baby with wide eyes. "Baby," Samuel said, pointing, "that is your brother Thomas. You have to be gentle with him." Mary reached out and touched Thomas's hand, and the baby's fingers curled around hers. Samuel and Amelia looked at each other and smiled. "We have a family," Amelia said softly. "We have a family," Samuel agreed. The next year passed in a blur of sleepless nights and baby cries, of laughter and love and the endless work of raising two small children and running a ranch. But despite the exhaustion, Amelia had never been happier. She loved her life, loved her husband, loved her children. Every morning she woke up grateful for the second chance she had been given. Thomas grew into a happy, healthy baby who looked more like Samuel with each passing day. Mary became a wonderful big sister, always wanting to help with the baby. The ranch prospered too, as Samuel worked hard to build it into something substantial, something he could pass on to his children one day. In the spring of 1880, Anna visited again, bringing her own baby daughter. The two women spent hours together while their children played, talking about motherhood and life and all the ways their world had changed. Samuel and Anna's husband, a quiet man named Robert, worked together on ranch projects and became friends. As the years passed, the Quentin family continued to grow and thrive. In 1882, Amelia gave birth to another daughter whom they named Emma. In 1884, another son arrived whom they called William. The house was always full of noise and life, and though there were hard times and struggles, there was also so much love. Samuel proved to be a wonderful father, patient and kind but firm when he needed to be. He taught his children about ranching, about the land, about the importance of hard work and honesty. Mary, though she knew that Samuel was not her biological father, never thought of him as anything other than her papa, and he loved her exactly the same as the children who shared his blood. Amelia grew into her role as a rancher's wife, becoming stronger and more confident with each passing year. She was no longer the desperate, frightened woman who had sat on the church steps with a crying baby. She was a mother, a wife, a partner in building something meaningful. She could ride a horse, help with the cattle, shoot a rifle if needed, and still make a dinner that would satisfy her hungry family. In 1885, Samuel surprised her with a trip to Santa Fe to visit Anna. It was the first time Amelia had been away from the ranch for more than a day since they had married, and though she missed the children terribly, it was wonderful to have time alone with Samuel. They stayed in a small hotel, ate in restaurants, and spent their evenings walking through the town and talking about their dreams for the future. On their last evening there, as they sat on a bench in the town plaza watching the sun set, Samuel took Amelia's hand. "Do you remember the first time I saw you?" he asked. "Of course," Amelia said. "I was sitting on the church steps and I thought my life was over." "I knew the moment I saw you that you were special," Samuel said. "I did not know I would fall in love with you, did not know we would build this incredible life together. But I knew I had to help you, and I am so grateful I did, because you have given me everything I ever wanted. A family, a home, a purpose. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." Amelia felt tears spring to her eyes. Even after all these years, Samuel could still make her cry with his sweetness. "You saved me," she said. "In every way a person can be saved. I love you so much." They kissed as the sun set over Santa Fe, two people who had found each other when they both needed it most, and had built something beautiful together. When they returned home, their children rushed to greet them, and the house was full of happy chaos. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Samuel and Amelia lay in bed together, Amelia's head on Samuel's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked softly. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Amelia answered. "Are you?" "Completely," Samuel said. He kissed the top of her head. "I have everything I need right here." The years continued to pass. The children grew up strong and healthy. Mary turned into a beautiful young woman who helped her mother with the younger children and the housework. Thomas became his father's right hand on the ranch, learning everything Samuel could teach him. Emma and William were still young but showed signs of becoming fine people themselves. In 1890, on a warm September evening, Samuel and Amelia celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary. The children had made a special dinner, and afterward the whole family sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. "Tell us the story again," Emma begged, "about how you and Mama met." Samuel and Amelia exchanged glances. They had told the story many times over the years, but the children never seemed to tire of it. "Well," Samuel began, "it was a September morning in 1878. I was riding into Aztec to get some supplies, and I saw a woman sitting on the church steps with a baby in her arms." "That was Mama and Mary," William piped up. "That is right," Samuel said. "Your Mama and Mary. They looked like they needed help, so I stopped to talk to them." "And Papa brought us home," Amelia continued. "He gave us food and a place to stay, even though he did not know us at all. He was the kindest man I had ever met." "And then you fell in love," Emma said with a happy sigh. "And then we fell in love," Samuel agreed, reaching over to take Amelia's hand. "And we got married and we built this life together. All of you are here because I happened to ride past that church on that particular morning. Funny how life works out sometimes." "It is not funny," Mary said softly. She was 18 now, grown up and wise. "It is beautiful. Papa saved you and me, and you saved him right back from being lonely. And now we are all here together." "That is exactly right," Amelia said, looking at her daughter with pride. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Samuel and Amelia walked out to their favorite spot on the ranch, the place overlooking the valley where Samuel had first kissed her all those years ago. The view had not changed, the mesas still painted gold by the setting sun, the river still winding through the valley below. 12 years, Samuel said. "It feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time." "I know what you mean," Amelia said. "Sometimes I can barely remember what my life was like before you. It is like everything before that day at the church was just preparation for this for us." "You ever think about him?" Samuel asked carefully. "Your first husband?" Amelia considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I think about the good times we had, and I am grateful for Mary, who would not exist without him. But Samuel, what we have, it is deeper than anything I had before. You are my partner in every sense of the word. I cannot imagine my life without you." Samuel pulled her close. "I love you, Amelia. I have loved you since that first day, and I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Amelia said, and they stood there together, watching the sun set on another day of their beautiful life. The children continued to grow and eventually began to leave home to start their own lives. Mary married a good man from a neighboring ranch in 1892, and Samuel walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations, proving himself to be as capable as his father. Emma and William were still young but showed promise of becoming fine adults. In 1895, Mary had a baby of her own, a daughter she named Amelia after her mother. When Amelia held her granddaughter for the first time, she was overwhelmed with emotion. She thought back to that day in 1878, when she had sat on the church steps with baby Mary, desperate and alone, thinking her life was over. If someone had told her then that she would one day be a grandmother, surrounded by a loving family in a comfortable home, she would not have believed them. But here she was, blessed beyond measure, and it was all because a kind cowboy had stopped to help a stranger in need. As the 19th century drew to a close, Samuel and Amelia entered their middle years with grace and gratitude. The ranch was successful, their children were thriving, and they still loved each other as much as they had on their wedding day, if not more. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative, and had come through stronger each time. One evening in 1899, as they sat on their porch watching yet another sunset, Samuel turned to Amelia with a smile. "We have done all right, haven't we?" he said. "We have done better than all right," Amelia said. "We have built something beautiful, a family, a legacy, a life full of love." "What more could anyone want?" "Nothing," Samuel said. "Absolutely nothing. I have everything I need right here." As the new century dawned in 1900, Samuel and Amelia looked forward to whatever the future might bring. They had grandchildren to spoil, a ranch to run, and each other to love. They had started with nothing, just a desperate woman and a kind man and a chance meeting at a church, and they had built an empire of love and family. The years continued to pass peacefully. More grandchildren arrived, and the house that had once seemed so quiet was always full of visiting children and grandchildren. Samuel and Amelia watched with pride as their children raised their own families, passing on the values of hard work, kindness, and love that they had learned from their parents. In 1905, Samuel and Amelia celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a big celebration. There was food and music and laughter, and as Samuel looked around at all the people who were there because of him and Amelia, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking about?" Amelia asked, coming to stand beside him. "Just about how lucky I am," Samuel said. "How lucky we are. All of this, everyone here, it all started because I decided to stop and help a woman on the church steps." "Best decision you ever made," Amelia teased. "Best decision I ever made," Samuel confirmed. He pulled her close and kissed her, not caring that their children were watching and probably rolling their eyes. "I love you, Amelia Quentin. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for stopping," Amelia said softly. "Thank you for seeing someone who needed help and actually helping. Thank you for loving me and Mary and giving us a home. You are the best man I have ever known, and I love you more than words can say." As the sun set on that perfect day, surrounded by their family, Samuel and Amelia knew that their story had been worth telling. It had started with abandonment and desperation, but it had turned into something beautiful. They had found each other when they both needed it most, and they had built a love that would last for generations. And as they stood there together, holding hands and watching their grandchildren play, they knew that this was what happiness looked like. This was what love looked like. This was what happened when a cowboy stopped to help a woman in need, and two hearts found their way home. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, with Samuel gradually stepping back to enjoy his later years. He and Amelia spent their days together, still as devoted to each other as they had been in the early days of their marriage. They took walks together, worked in the garden together, and sat on their porch together watching the sunsets they had watched for so many years. In 1910, on a crisp autumn morning, Amelia woke to find Samuel watching her with a tender expression. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking about how beautiful you still are," Samuel said. "How much I still love waking up next to you every morning." Amelia smiled and reached for his hand. "We have been lucky, haven't we, to have found each other, to have had all these years together." "The luckiest," Samuel agreed. "I would not change a single thing about our life together." They spent that day like many others, working around the ranch, playing with visiting grandchildren, enjoying each other's company. As evening fell and they settled onto their porch to watch the sunset, Amelia leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" she asked. "When you found me at the church." "I said a lot of things that day," Samuel said with a smile. "You said it was just basic human decency to help someone in need," Amelia said. "But it was so much more than that, Samuel. It was extraordinary. You changed my entire life with that one act of kindness." "We changed each other's lives," Samuel corrected gently. "You gave me purpose, gave me a family, gave me love. We saved each other, Amelia. That is what we did." As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Samuel and Amelia sat together in comfortable silence. They had been married for 32 years, had raised 4 children, and now had 8 grandchildren with more on the way. They had built a successful ranch and a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. But more than any of that, they had found each other. A desperate woman with a baby and a kind cowboy had come together on a September morning in 1878, and from that chance meeting had grown a love story for the ages. They had faced hardships and celebrated triumphs, had raised children and built a home, and through it all, their love had only grown stronger. As darkness fell and the stars came out, Samuel helped Amelia to her feet, and they walked hand in hand back into their house, the house where they had built their life together. Tomorrow would bring new joys and new challenges, but they would face them together, just as they had faced everything for the past 3 decades. Because that was what love was, Amelia thought as she settled into bed beside her husband. Love was choosing to stop when you saw someone who needed help. Love was offering kindness without expecting anything in return. Love was building a life together, one day at a time, through good times and bad. Love was a cowboy who saw a woman abandoned on church steps and decided to take her home. And in the end, love was everything. It was the beginning of their story and the thread that ran through every chapter. It was what they had built their entire lives upon, and it would be their legacy long after they were gone. Samuel pulled Amelia close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This was home. This was love. This was the happy ending she had never thought possible on that desperate morning so many years ago, and she was grateful for every single moment of it.